Hello, welcome back to Evil Genius Props. My name is Mike, and I'll be your Evil Genius for today. What we're doing today is finishing up our Dynios book puppet build. Parts 1 and 2 are previously available. We'll put a link up in the corner. That corner, maybe? I don't know, one of these corners. What we've done so far is in part 1, we sort of built the skeleton for it. Part 2, we built the skin. And now we're going to finish it off and put in the decorations and make it look like a magic tome as opposed to just some, your everyday face in a book. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the glue on the front's dried. I've also went ahead and glued the back. I'm actually going to cut a slot in the back for the hand to go through to work the puppet. But the next step is going to be to glue down these edges and try to avoid gluing my fingers together with super glue. Quick lesson I learned. There was on the pink foam over here a spot where some of the glue had dragged over onto it. And it was not a big deal, but there was a little bit of a hole. So I'm like, Turns out that contact cement will melt XPS foam. Not terribly surprising, as just about it seems like everything will melt XPS foam, but this is good information to have. This is just a test piece to make sure that that's what happened. And that's a pretty significant hole in there. So something to learn is don't use contact cement on XPS foam. So what I actually did on the spine was just use some wood glue, which is PVA glue. I was going to use Mod Podge, but turns out I'm out. I'm not out. What I have is dried. So what I'm going to do now is these little rolled edges to make the sides. I'm going to go in with some super glue and glue those edges down. And then once that's done, we're pretty much to the point where I can start just doing decorative touches. We'll do some paint on the front and maybe clean things up there a little bit. Do some decorations around the front. It's described as having runes around the edges. So we'll do some runes, maybe do some stuff on the spine, and otherwise just generally make it look more like a fancy wizard's book than just a collector's edition of the Da Vinci Code. Well, I got glue on my fingers, but I didn't glue them together, so I'll call that a win. Let that dry and set up, and then we'll come back and, like I said, do some decoration. I think what I'm going to do is I've got some thin brass that we're going to lay along the edges here. And then do some runes on the inside of that. And we'll give Dynios here himself a little bit of a cleanup and some paint. So here's where we are with the book. It's got a nice little face on there, but we got some edges that have some crimps from the little clips there. We need to trim off the edges and a couple of little things like that. One of the things I wanted to do, book like this probably would have actually been chained. It's hard to understand now, but books were valuable. Even in the actual Middle Ages, and a magic book from the Cobalt Soul would be even more valuable than that. So it would not be surprising to have a chain attaching it to the shelf. And the way books were stored then was actually like this, so it would be chained and then you would just open it on the shelf. So I printed off a chain, but neglected to consider how to attach that. So rather than deal with Fusion 360 or Tinkercad or anything like that to design my own, I found these that I already had in my shop here. And it's actually like a cable clip. So you'd put this to hold your Cat5 cable or phone cable, if you remember what that is. And you would just do that. So it turns out this is just about the right size to fit. The only problem is I'd kind of want it to be this way so I could attach it on the back. And it's a little bit too wide, so I'm going to cut off the edges here and make it a little bit narrower, and also take out this part where it says GB 1/2. So it's a tool. Time to break out the Dremel again, and we'll clean this up and then be able to attach that onto the back and clean that up. What we're also going to do is have some brass banding, and we're going to put that along the edges here. Haven't decided if I'm going to have one over here, but definitely have it on the outsides, and so sort of just hold all that together, cover up these parts, but also it would add some appeal to the book, visual appeal, of make it look more important and fancy. So I think what I'll do is I'll start off with the outside edge and see how that looks, and then decide if I want to put one up along here first. But next up is trimming this piece down to fit along the back, and I think it's really just take off these parts where it sticks out past the circle. Let's clean this up a little bit and take off some of the top there. I'm going to change bits real quick to do that with. All right, let's see how this works now. Clean up a little bit more, but in general, it's a lot better. All right, so I've trimmed that down, and now it fits rather nicely with the chain. So I'm just gonna attach this into the back here, so that then basically he's got a little bit of a tail. And there we go, nice little chain tail for him. And we'll paint that up to make it look a little more metallic and aged, but for right now, we're good. So what I'm going to do with this is, rather than leave the edges straight, I'm going to cut them on a 45 to basically miter them, and then that way I can do them and have them join up. So I'll start off with that and maybe leave the top and bottom ones a little bit longer, just to see if I'm going to cut that straight or not on the other side, if I'm even going to have it that one. But first things first is cut this at 45. All right, so now we'll put this like this, and that makes up our bottom. So like I said, I'm going to cut this side over here a little bit long, so if I want to miter it to add in a piece up here, I can. I'm just going to go ahead and do that again on the top, and then we'll come back and glue that all on. Okay, and there it is with the three sides. I think I do want that fourth side just to help sort of even it out, look more appropriate to have like the cover have it and then the spine. So put another piece here. I do have another piece of it, but that's the basic idea. All right, so I've gone ahead and cut this out, this brass borer, and tried it on a piece, scratch piece, to make sure that it would actually stick with just super glue. Working really well. Don't want to put too much because apparently it squeezes out a little bit. So we're going to clamp that, glue that and clamp it, and then come back. I initially said that I was going to paint the face and sort of use that to call out highlights and shadows. I did some tests on that as well and just did not like the results. The black wasn't really noticeable at all. I mean, I did use that to cover up some places where the foam was showing, but it wasn't really that much of a difference. Like most you could see would be a difference in sheen. And then I tried some grays and metallics and just did not like those results at all. Even tried just, could I maybe do some lines just with a Sharpie or something? And yes, but I still don't like the results that it got me, so I'm just going to leave it as is and do the brass bits here and come back after that and see where we are. So we're going to use some of the CA glue. Use some little spring clamps to help hold that in place. I guess not that one because I threw it on the floor. All right, we'll let that dry. We have the brass all attached, so that's most of the big stuff is done. Now it's just sort of down to the fun appearance stuff. So we're going to go through and cut off the excess pleather, cover up the wood. Actually, that might even look pretty good already as a book. Just use the grain of the wood there. Maybe covered up on the underside and the top though. Paint his tail, which I probably should have painted before I attached it, but I wanted to make sure that would work, and now here we are. That's okay. You'll also note I've got this on a piece of foam, so that way I can flip him however I need to, and he's not going to get not sitting on something hard. So I can push on this, and then the connection point for the tail here just sort of sinks into the foam. But we're going to do that, clean that stuff up. Like I said, I'm not going to do paint on his head there. Paint this up, but overall, nearly there. I think I'm going to put a spot of super glue on these corners, sort of tack them down a little bit better. All right, here's my dilemma for the back. Should the slip be vertical or horizontal? I feel like maybe horizontal is the better option. I think I might put a couple just little relief cuts. All right, let's talk about the book pages. Honestly, I feel like this, especially from a distance, already looks enough like sort of pages. I'm just going to leave that as is. The top and the bottom, though, I cannot do that with. Now, there's a number of ways I could do this, depending on how good I want it to look, really. If I was making this as a commission for someone, I would take a piece of faux H paper, fold it over, maybe even again, glue all of this down, slit this edge, glue this together, and then like cut thin strips of it, and then glue those down individually. So there's individual parts, like pieces of paper there. It'd still all be one piece, but it would look like you'd actually see the different edges. If I was doing this for stage, I would literally just sort of paint the pink foam probably. This is going to be somewhere in between those two. What I'm going to do is take, again, this H paper and sort of cut it to fit, glue it down, and then I think I might actually even just take, that's a pen, that's a pencil, and just do very thin lines. And specifically a pencil, not a pen, because I want them to be light, because they're just supposed to be like shadow showing, as opposed to full-on difference, like hard lines. So what we're going to do is take this H paper, cut it to fit, glue it to the top and the bottom. Two and a half inches, which I think is what I actually set out to do, which is impressive. I'm not usually good at that part. So I'm just gonna hit this with some PVA glue. So it could be some white glue, or in this case, I'm gonna do a light coating of wood glue. You know, might work better actually. I've got some Mod Podge. Very old Mod Podge, but Mod Podge nonetheless. Well, I had some Mod Podge. Trigger warning, that's nasty, but it seems to have solidified. Back to the wood glue. I don't just want to do a thin coat. I don't really want it to like soak through the paper or anything. Go ahead and put a clamp on the foam part over here. I'm not going to do it hard, just enough to kind of keep it pressed against there. I don't actually want to compress the foam. And now we're going to do an airbrush coat on this guy. Actually, before I do the painting on the chain, the description was that it had runes and symbols all along the outside. So I pulled up and found some alchemical and other just sort of runic symbols. I'm going to put some of those on the periphery here. And they're described as being in silver. I'm just going to use a silver Sharpie. Not really going to have anything in particular, but there might be a few, if you know them, specific little Easter eggs. Probably not going to do a whole lot of the actual giant runes because these are a little more complicated than I'm able to really do well. But these are the only ones I could actually find from Dungeons and Dragons. Happy with those. Starting to look a little more like a book and a little less like a weird puppet. Now we'll flip it over and do the paint on the tail. Keep calling it the tail. It's chain, the lock. So I just stuck a piece of the scrap paper that I didn't use underneath. The first step is just to paint all of this just black. That should be the hardest link to paint. Alright, we'll let everything dry. Then I'm going to come back and touch this up with some rust. It's maybe some gray, depending on how much gray is not just already poking through. And then maybe some silver, but not a lot. We want it to look more old and rusted than we want it to look clean and shiny. But we'll step back and let all this dry and see where we are. So what I've done is I went through and hit the chain with some rust-colored airbrush paints, both just a flat and then also metallic. I do like that the metallic had some flake in it and gave it some shimmer. I don't like that that flake then clogged my airbrush and I had to clean it, but it's almost a little too shiny now for being, you know, aged and ugly. So I'm gonna weather it a little bit with some acrylic paint, just sort of a burnt sienna, and what color is this? Light oxide red. Well, red oxide would be rust, so that's the right color. We're just gonna mix a little bit of those and some water. Really just want to tone this down some. Still maintain that that rust look. Just gonna hit this on. Not even gonna hit everywhere, because it'll let some of that metallic come through still. I just don't want it so much of it. So yes, to recap, we printed it in gray, we painted it black, we painted it rust color, and now we're going back over with more of that, and maybe even do some more black. And weathering is all about adding layers and age. Age, unless you're weathering, doesn't happen all at once. So it's all about layering. And that's me bumping the camera. It's nice because I printed this with the FDM printer as opposed to the resin printer, and that sort of gave me these layer lines that I didn't do a whole lot to take care of and remove. So that'll sort of be a good place to pick up some of that weathering. I don't want to take out all of that, but I do want to take out some. And if I take out too much, I go back and I put some more. Sort of dab a little bit. Just let that finish drying. So that's kind of our last steps on this. We'll flip it over and take a look while that's still drying. So that's pretty much what we're going to call done. There are some places that I would like to fix that I just didn't quite. I don't like this little seam here. Some things maybe just didn't quite work out the way I thought they would. I'm okay with it. This is a good first effort. It's a good sort of proof of concept. And I think what I've really learned from this is how I want to do it again. And I think I will try to do it again before San Diego Comic-Con. And if I don't make it so the face disappears, which is what I was trying to do here, then obviously that didn't work and I had to change horses sort of midstream. If I know about that going in, it's going to be designed differently and I'm going to make it look different. And I'm going to do the puppet part differently. So I think this is going to be ripe for a redo, even if it's just this part. Just wrap this around, like cut this, wrap the existing parts around, and sort of put a new puppet part in the middle. Because lots of this are really good. Lots of this I'm happy with. But this is something that I think I'm going to come back and fix later. But for right now, that's probably going to be it. That's what we're going to go with. Like I said, there's a lot that I do like, and if I was doing this for, say, a show, like a play or musical, I would call this great and be happy to move on to the next item. Because I'm doing this sort of for my own personal enjoyment and nobody's paying me, there's no set time frame on it. I'm going to come back and do this again, I think. I'm going to redo the puppet. So look for that video to come in the future. But in the meantime, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to see any other prop builds or suggestions, throw them in the comments below. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.